Okay, good evening, everyone. I am Anthony DeCarlo. I'm the interim superintendent of schools here at the East Ramapo Central School District. And tonight, I'm here with our assistant superintendent for business, Mr. Eric Stark, and we're going to present to you a little bit of the overview of the 25-26 budget presentation tonight. And what's really important is that as we look at, and I have it the wrong way, everybody out there, because I have it upside down. If we look at this budget, it really looks at investing in the future of our students. And there's a number of things that you will see in the budget presentation tonight with regards to, I know there's a lot of questions out there in the public about what's happening, what's going on. We know we have these monies, and what's the district going to do with these monies, and you're going to see a little bit about what we're doing with the monies, and then actually what we actually are able to do with regards to the 25-26 school budget. So we're looking at, of course, instruction for students, because that's what we do each and every day. I want to talk to you a little bit about how we're going to prioritize our resources in the district and kind of reallocate some of our resources. And then we're going to look at the different kind of pathways for success, both for our students academically and social emotionally. And these are our four domains that we talk about when we talk about improvement here at East Ramapo. We talk about turnaround leadership, talent development, instructional transformation, and cultural shift. So as you will see in this presentation, and over the last month and a half, if you watched me at board meetings, you know that myself and my team of our assistant superintendents in all the different departments and executive directors, they spoke to you a little bit about what their needs are, why they need what they need, and then how that impacts our budget moving forward. And you'll see in a little while that we're going to be able to do a lot of these things in a very fiscally responsible manner, and myself and Mr. Stark will talk to you a little bit about what that looks like. As I mentioned to you, you can see our long-range goals. So what's really important for you to understand out there in the community is that this budget is not just about the 25-26 school year. This budget is for years to come. And one of the stories that I think we've been talking about is none of us want to see the amount of schools that we have on our state list of schools and some of the things that we have to do from our set programs and other things. But one of the reasons why we have and where we are right now is that the district really needs to do a better job really establishing a strategic roadmap for what it wants to do, not only for next year and the future. And that centers around curriculum, professional development, staff, because that's really important. When I talk about staff, I'm talking about staff of teachers, teacher assistants, aides, monitors, deans of students, instructional coaches, and you'll see that as we go along the way. And what Mr. Stark is going to also tell you a little bit about is the importance of this budget, because as you know, for the last number of years here at East Ramapo, we've either had failed budgets or budgets that really don't meet the needs of the students. And as a result of that, we can't do the kind of projects that we need to do. And you'll see in this budget, we're going to be able to do some things that we think are really necessary for our buildings and grounds, as well as what we need to do instructionally for our students. And now I'm going to turn over to Mr. Stark. He'll take you through a little bit of the tax calculations, and then I'll come back in a couple of minutes. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So what I'm first going to go over is the maximum allowable tax levy calculation. So as many of you are probably aware, about 10 or 12 years ago, the New York State Legislature put into effect the New York State property tax cap, which puts a limit on the amount that the tax cap can be increased on an annual basis. And every school district has a formula that it fills out. And we've gone over this several times at our board meetings. I'll quickly run through it. You start with the prior year's levy. You then multiply it by a tax base growth factor, which is a number that is set forth by the New York State Office of Real Property Services, which has to do with the amount of real new bricks and mortar growth that has happened in the past year within the school district boundaries. That gets you to an adjusted levy. You add back pilots from the prior year, which are payments in lieu of taxes. And then you take out the exclusions that are permitted from the prior year, which are mainly having to do with capital expenditures and the associated state aid that comes along with that. At that point, you then multiply the adjusted levy by the growth factor, which is capped at 2%. The growth factor is based upon inflation. So inflation is much more than 2%, but the property tax cap doesn't allow you to use an inflation factor of more than 2%. So this year we're using 2%. You then pull back out the pilots for the coming year to get your tax levy limit before exclusions. You add back in the capital exclusions that you are permitted to, and you come up with a maximum levy. That number is approximately $5 million more than the current year's levy, or an increase of the tax levy that would be permissible of 3.15%. And I'm going to skip ahead here just to discuss that. As you see, this is, I didn't skip ahead far enough. In our draft revenue budget, we are not going to that maximum allowable tax levy. We are keeping the tax levy flat at 0% increase, and we'll discuss why that is happening a little bit further along, but it is primarily because the district has been the recipient of large increases in state aid over the past 3 school years, which allows us to keep the levy flat this year. So I'm going to back up a little bit now just to talk about the taxes. And the taxpayers in this school district are actually taxed at a rate that is lower than any other school district in Rockland County. This graph shows a 20-year history of all of the school districts within Rockland County, and we are the red line that on the right side comes down below everyone else. It's at the bottom. What you see, if you go back 25 years, is that North Rockland was always the highest, but the East Ramapo School District was right smack in the middle of all of the school districts in Rockland County in terms of the amount of taxes that they had to pay per $1,000 in value of your home. Over this 24-year period now, East Ramapo's taxes are the lowest in the county, and are less than half of what or actually about 2.5 times lower than the highest district, which is North Rockland, which is that green line on the top. So getting back to state aid, if you've been to any of the board meetings or seen any of our presentations, you'll know that the revenue budget for the school district is primarily made up of 2 different pieces. There are a lot of other little pieces, but the 2 largest pieces are state aid and the tax levy. This here is showing you that in the current, for the coming school year, the 25-26 school year, the district is going to receive $16 million in increases in the various aid categories, most of which is found within the foundation aid, which is that first line. You can see the increase there is $12.8 million. So overall, there's an increase of $16.19 million in state aid, and that is one of the major factors that allows us to have a budget that increases, but not have to increase the tax levy. So again, we get back to the full revenue budget, which includes that number that I just showed you. In the middle column there, 3 rows down, of $167 million. And again, the overall budget will increase by $9.6 million, and that is primarily due to the fact that the state has provided us with a very nice increase in aid. This is a graphic representation of what has happened to our revenue budget over the past 3 cycles. And it's very interesting to note that in the 22-23 school year, property tax made up over 60% of the revenue budget, making it obviously the largest part of the budget because it was more than 50%. Moving forward to the budget that we have for 25-26, property tax is no longer the largest piece of the revenue pie. It is now 46.7%, and state aid, with the large increases that the state has given us over the past 3 years, is now in that first position and makes up the greatest portion of that budget. So actually, we're gonna go back now. I didn't mention this before, but you have two budgets, and they have to balance. So you have a revenue budget, and you also have an expenditure budget, and those two budgets have to be equal. So I've gone through all of the items in the revenue budget, and now I'm going to turn it back over to Mr. DiCarlo for a few minutes to discuss most of the main changes that we have to our expenditure budget, and those are involving positions and people working in different places within the district. So,
Thank you, Mr. Stark. So I want to go back to what Mr. Stark talked about before, and he talked to you about state aid. And back in the fall, I had a conversation at a board meeting, and I talked about foundation aid, and that East Ramapo had been shortchanged for almost close to 20 years or more. What do I mean by shortchanged? I mean the following. The state of New York was looking at poverty rates for East Ramapo based on the 2000 census. It's because they went and they updated it to 22-23 census that we saw a windfall of money in state aid because of the reasoning of this community changing. Second piece, the last 5 years, 4 to 5 years, we've had an influx of students coming in from all around the world, many of whom, of course, are L's. We are an L district. I mean, we have over 60% of our kids who are L learners. And what happened was we were not coding the students properly. And so what was happening is we also were not getting the amount of financial aid that we should have gotten for actually the number of students that were in seats who were L learners. And thanks to our Assistant Superintendent, Ms. Morales, and her team, they've really cleaned up those roles. I think this last year, they had us down the year before for approximately 5,000 students. We actually added another 2, which is more indicative, and that also helped out with our state aid numbers. So that's a really important understanding to get a better gauge of why we are in the situation that we are in, because that's really important. Next piece. We always look at things short term, but at East Ramapo, you have to look at things over time. So the next couple of slides, you are going to see a number of positions that we are looking for. But if you go back to 2010, 2014, there was approximately, literally close to 200-300 staff members that were let go because of the financial issues here at East Ramapo. So many of these positions that we have put in, we're bringing them back. And mind you, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, 15 years ago, we had many of these positions with 8,000 students. We now have 10,200 students. And that's a really important piece to understand as we move forward. Our Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum Instruction, Dr. Gonzalez, has said at a number of meetings recently, we're actually trying to level the district. This is not that we're out there just deciding to bloat this district and putting position after position in. No. We're trying to level where we should be. So you will see in front of you, we're looking at a variety of different positions, and these positions will help us throughout our K-12 continuum here. Because we know, and the state of New York has said this, September of next year, there's a big push on the state to say, guess what? We need kids to be able to read and write by the time they finish their experience in 3rd grade. And you need to concentrate on what that looks like. So in our conversations with our principals, our assistant principals, our executive directors, assistant superintendents, we know how important that is, and we know to help enhance that instructional practices, we're looking at instructional coaches, both in mathematics and in literacy throughout the district. What does that mean? That allows our teachers to have service providers in classrooms with them, helping our students better be ready to read and write. And these are really the core of what we're looking at doing. We're looking at adding teacher assistants in our elementary, especially kindergarten classes, to help teachers with students to get them ready. Because one of the things that we struggle with in education is getting students to understand that they have to build stamina. What does that mean, Mr. DiCarlo, building stamina? That means that as they go through each grade level, they have to be able to sit for more time to do the kind of work that needs to be done so they can be successful. So if we can bring teachers' assistants in to help with our kindergarten teachers, that will go a long, long way. And then we're looking, of course, at district level clerical, transportation, and you've heard me mention this all the time. We are second to New York City in transportation, yet we have a very bare bones transportation department. We need to add to that. Our HR department, we need to be able to add clerical support staff for that. So you can see a lot of these positions are across the district, instructionally, social emotionally for kids, and in each one of our offices. And then you'll see another series again of some of the things I talked about when it comes to clerical workers, groundskeepers, and the like. I do want to share some really positive information with you. This past Saturday at the district office, we had a job fair. It was packed, everybody. From the time we started at 10 o'clock till we ended at 3, we had so many different people and so many different aspects of this institution looking for jobs, and it was really enlightening and refreshing to see that people truly want to come here and work in East Ramapo. But one of the struggles that you see in front of you with these vacancies is the following. For the last decade, no money, no budgets, contingency, and so at times, even if we could hire, we were hiring at the end of the cycle. Guess what? Everybody was taken and went to other districts. Number 2, who's coming to East Ramapo? Those of you who are out there watching this, who's coming to East Ramapo? When we were last year at this time, the Board of Education and the community thought we were closing down the district. There was no money. So people aren't going to come to a school district where they don't know from year to year if it's going to be open or not, or if there's enough money to be able to function. So we want to start to create that difference. And I said this the other day to many of the applicants that came to see myself and Ms. Rolusco, because we were at the administrators table. I truly believe with this budget, as was presented by Mr. Stark, as zero, is fiscally responsible, and this really can begin a renaissance in this district. I really, truly believe that. I really, truly believe that this is that seminal year that we can start to rebuild back where we need to be, and then from there, we're going to be able to take off. But we can only do that with the support of the community. And again, one of the things, and I'm going to turn it back to Eric in a second, that's really important about this budget, it's 0%, but yet we get to add these positions. But most importantly, we also get to do work in our facilities. Ladies and gentlemen, and people in the public, if you travel to any of our schools and you look at the condition of our parking lots, it's deplorable. It's a health and safety issue. But because of what I told you 5 minutes ago, and because we are on contingency budgets and zero, okay, Moody's, which, oh, by the way, is a third party, they have nothing to do with the state, they have nothing to do with the board, they're a third party, and they've said, guess what, East Ramapo, you can't get money lended because you don't pass budgets. And if you do, it's minimal, you cannot, so we have a junk bond rating. So we can't go out and do the kind of work we have. So I want to reiterate this. In this budget currently, as it stands at zero, if it passes, we can take $5.5 million and put it towards capital projects that we definitely need, especially our parking lots. That's really, really important to understand, because at the end of the day, these are the kind of things that we need to do. So, Mr. Stark, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk a little bit about what we've done. And this is really important. This is changing every day when it comes to the federal government and funding.
Thank you. So I'm actually just going to go back for a second just to talk about all these other positions. One thing that wasn't mentioned was another thing that made it very hard for us to hire staff members in this district is that the pay that we were paying in most of our contracts was very, very low in terms of the other school districts in Rockland County. So we were below market. And during this school year, we have now settled 4 different contracts. And in those settlements, the contracts now have wages that are substantially greater and not necessarily over market, but at market within Rockland County, which is also going to make it easier for us to bring people on board because we're not going to be struggling with at least the one piece, which would be I can make more somewhere else. So that's another piece that we've worked on correcting. The last piece in terms of additional positions, these are positions that had been being paid for out of federal grants, and one of our goals that you had seen earlier in developing the budget was to move grant-funded positions back into the general fund budget, and that having been one of our goals, some things have been happening recently within the federal government and the downsizing of the Department of Education that have made this a very important piece. Recently, we have found out that we will not be receiving some of the federal aid money that was promised through the ESSER ARP grant. So any positions that are being funded within any of the federal grants are suspect now. We're in the very early stages of learning about how the federal government is going to be cutting funding to school districts throughout the country. So we're working on that. Both the assistant superintendents groups and the superintendents groups are meeting later in this week, and we imagine that that will be one of the big topics of conversation as we move forward there. And as we have more information about that, we'll be sharing it with everybody. Sorry, we had a slide here that was talking about what are we going to do in order to hire all of these positions. It's obviously pretty daunting when you're looking at a number of positions to hire that have that total more than 200, especially when we've talked about the fact that we have that we're not properly staffed in human resources. But we have put together a really good plan. As Mr. DiCarlo mentioned earlier, we are holding several job fairs of our own. We are attending job fairs that others are having, including some universities that train teachers and get them certified. We're also creating new relationships with some of the local universities to help get some of their graduating students to learn a little bit more about East Ramapo and create some partnerships so that we can hopefully bring some of those graduating students on board here. We're also putting together hiring committees, which include many of the central office administrators as well as building level administrators to create different areas where we can divide up into different groupings, how we can hire some of the different areas. So for example, you might have one hiring committee for teaching assistants for the kindergartner classrooms. And you might have another committee that's going to be focusing more on central office directors and executive directors. So we've put a pretty good plan together, and we're very excited about the prospects, especially when we saw the great turnout that we had at our job fair this past Saturday. So that moves us on to the final piece, which is the expenditure budget. And you can see here, again, the budgets from each year for revenues and expenditures are always going to be equal to each other. So our expenditure budget here is increasing by $9,640,000. And there are a couple of things that I want to point out. Number one, you'll see that the general education and special education lines are going down. This is not because we have removed teachers or supplies or anything from those lines. This is created by us correcting the budget where things had been miscoded in prior years. We've talked about this several times during board meetings during the school year, that we would be taking the opportunity this year to put things in the right places where they're supposed to be according to the coding system that's put forth by the state of New York for school districts. Most of our, or a lot of our multilingual education expenditures were either sitting within the general ed or special ed areas, so those have all been corrected. The other two large decreases that you see, the decreases are, have the red numbers in the right column, are, the first is transportation. So you can see that we have a decrease in the amount budgeted for transportation of just under $10 million. And that's very important to note, because there have been many conversations, many complaints from board members, community members, that the transportation budget was overly inflated in prior years. We've looked at that very carefully. We have agreed with that, and we have right-sized that budget and reduced it to where we believe it will be coming out relatively, that we will spend most of the budget, whereas much of that transportation budget in the last 2 years, although it was much higher, wasn't really being spent. In addition, in the debt service area, in prior years we've budgeted approximately $2 million for revenue anticipation notes. These are, this is a category that is in a budget when the school district needs to borrow money to get through the summer months before the tax levy is collected. And with the fact that we have a healthy fund balance now, which again is a very good thing, we no longer have to budget the $2 million that were earmarked for the revenue anticipation notes. So when you look at those few items, the transportation, the decrease in transportation and debt service, and the fact that the overall budget has increased by 9.6 million, what that tells you is that overall we are able to, within this budget, increase spending on the educational portion of our program by over $20 million. And we're doing that all without increasing the tax levy, which is very important. The other part that you see there that we also want to highlight is that last line of interfund transfers, which Mr. DiCarlo just mentioned a few minutes ago, and those dollars will be used towards doing capital work on parking lots, as he said, also some boilers. We have 2 boilers that are over 50 years old in this district, and we would hope to replace those using those funds as well. So that gets us through the major pieces of the expenditure budget. We have one more representation of our expenditures in a graph form. And the interesting part here is that in most school districts you'll see 3 pieces of that pie that are much larger than the rest, and those are special education, general education, and employee benefits. Here we have a 4th. So we have a very large piece. The orange piece there is transportation budget, and because we have such a large population of non-public students that we must transport, we have a much larger transportation slice of our pie than you would find in most other school districts. But for the most part, those other pieces are would be relatively similar if you were looking at another school district in Rockland County or in the lower part of the state. And I think, yep, that's getting us to the end. So back to Mr. DiCarlo.
Thank you, Eric. And in closing, I really think this is important. I want to thank Mr. Stark. I want to thank building administrators. I want to thank central office, because here's what we did. This was all based on a zero-based budget. We didn't do what has been done in the past, take the current year and then roll it over X amount of percentage. We started from ground zero. And that's really important for the public to understand, that there was a lot of effort and transparency that went into this. As I mentioned to you at the beginning of what each one of the assistant superintendents reported out on to the board, Eric has a document, I think it's 118 pages of the budget, properly coded, which was not done in the past, with notes as to why lines went up or down. So I mentioned this before, we are really wanting to provide the public with the most accurate information, transparency around all that we're doing, because that's the most important piece moving forward. So over the next couple of weeks, you'll be hearing more from us, because the board has to adopt the budget number by April 22nd, and then we'll be sending home a variety of different newsletters and information out there. Myself and Eric are going to be going throughout East Ramapo to present the final budget to the community. But here's the really most important thing, and this is what really can be frustrating, and I mentioned this to you because I think it's important. The past is the past, and I've said this before. I can't give you back the past. We can only work on the future. And I hear a lot of things, being an interim superintendent here, that, oh, this is just the way it is, Mr. DiCarlo. This is what happens. People feel that, there's no sense in going out to vote because this is what's going to happen. That's the wrong attitude. Every year is a new year. And you need, if you can, to exercise your right to vote, to voice your opinion on if you think the budget that we have presented is fiscally responsible. Like, those are the things you have to ask when you go into that booth. Is the budget I'm voting on fiscally responsible, and does it meet the needs of our students so they can be successful, be ready for career and college? That's what it's all about. Because here at East Ramapo, there's a lot of stuff that gets thrown in with that, and that conflates what's important for what's best for kids. So again, I thank you, those of you who are in the audience who came out tonight to listen. I thank those of you who are home, watching this. Again, thank you to the team for all your work and dedication. And we hope that come May 20th, you come out and you voice your opinion on the budget. So thank you all very much for tuning in tonight. I thank you. Have a great evening.